It's whatever day it is, Wednesday, January 21st, I believe. And I'm going to talk about professional wrestling's greatest creative crutch this year, last year, probably last 10 or 15 years. Doesn't matter the company, whether it's our current companies in the United States, WWE, AEW, the offshoot of AEW, the sister promotion ROH. There's other companies that have been guilty of this in the past. You could probably make a point that TNA was guilty of this, going back to Jim Crockett Promotions, one of my favorite promotions from wrestling's great history. They were very guilty of this. And we're going to talk about it because it's kind of why I haven't been watching so much pro wrestling, at least the modern day wrestling. I still keep tabs. I don't watch with one eye open, as many of you might feel the same way. I'm still watching old stuff, and I'm still watching some of the new stuff, but it's a creative crutch. These titles, as the title of this video says, I actually had to look it up on good old Wikipedia, so hopefully all this facts are straight. But from my readings, basically, WWE currently has 20 championships. I should have asked you before I said it. I should have let you guess. 20 championships between Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. You've got Gunther. It starts from the top with the WWE. You have Cody Rhodes is supposed to be the undisputed WWE champion. I can't even remember these names of these titles, how they say it. But Cody beat Roman. Roman had beaten Brock at that WrestleMania match, which I thought was a good idea, to unify the Universal Championship with the WWE Championship. And then just a couple of years later, they have Seth Rollins wins this tournament over, I believe, AJ Styles, and I think it was even at one of the Crown Jewel shows or the Saudi Arabian shows. And it's like we're right back to square zero here. How can you have a guy walking around saying he's the undisputed world champion when there's another world champion in the same company? Now, don't give me this horse shit about two different shows. That's like saying the NFL has a Thursday night football champion and a Monday night football champion, and they also have the Sunday afternoon champion and the Sunday night champion. It makes absolutely no sense. The NBA, I guess you could say, is somewhat guilty of this. I know we're comparing apples and oranges with legitimate, supposedly non-determined sports like basketball and football to pro wrestling, but you're telling me that they can't figure out a way for the wrestling champion. Hi, Amir. Nice to see you, big sexy. Why don't you get a job instead of talking to a phone? Okay, big sexy. Walmart, $17 an hour. Well, big sexy, I don't like you, okay? As a matter of fact, big sexy can go fuck himself. How about that, big sexy? Rebirth of the spiritual chosen one. Hello, sir. Nice to see you there, buddy. Let me just get to my point here. Gunther is a champion. How can he be a world heavyweight champion and have these world title defenses, and also Cody is the world heavyweight champion in the same company? It makes absolutely no sense. Now, back in the day when you had something like Kerry Von Erich versus Jerry Lawler at Super Clash 3, at least they were trying to have some type of thing where this was an actual world champion versus world champion. I just don't understand it. And let's go to AEW, because there's plenty of blame to go around. Moxley is the world heavyweight champion. He's done that 4 times at this point. And you also have Daniel Garcia as a TNT champion. Now, at one point, I believe the TNT title was originally won by good old Cody Rhodes in a tournament, and that was kind of his consolation prize because he lost that match to Jericho and couldn't be the world champion. So Garcia's got that title now, and we've seen that title bounce around. Sammy Garcia had it a couple of times. I believe Wardlow and all these people had that title. International Championship, this is where it got kind of weak. When they introduced this International Championship, although I will say that Orange Cassidy and Moxley had a great match for this thing on pay-per-view once upon a time. But Takeshita, fine wrestler, great wrestler. But what's the difference? according to Wikipedia and according to what I've seen on AEW, the international title for AEW is defended within other companies. But shouldn't that be the world title? I mean, why is Moxley, if he's the world heavyweight champion, the number one wrestler in AEW, if he's the world champion, why isn't he encouraged or allowed or permitted or, required to wrestle champions from other companies? I mean, I guess it's just an abomination or just a watering down of what a world champion in pro wrestling is supposed to mean. I mean, for those of you that are old enough or have done your research, you've seen the Harley Race days, the Dory Funk Jr. days, or you've heard about it at least. These guys would go from territory to territory. Yes, I know it's a different system now. I know it's done differently. But if you're going to say that the international world champion or the international champion, Takeshita, is supposed to wrestle wrestlers from other countries, then what's going on? Ian, if you've looked at my Instagram, Ian's a good buddy of mine. He's done some podcasts with me. I was looking for you, buddy, actually, because I got kicked off Facebook. And actually 4 of my YouTube channels got kicked off. Man in the Camera Films got kicked off. These other channels got kicked off. If you look me on Instagram, I'm trying to do the branding thing, which I hate that term, but one Mike Messier is on Instagram. One Mike Messier, the number one Mike Messier, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube is where I do the movie reviews. I'm still here, Ian, and I was actually looking for your email or something, but apparently we only got in touch with through Facebook. Hello, Erica. Good to see you. Gerald, Gulf America. Now let's go. We're not talking politics today, buddy. I mean, if you want me to do a political Trump video, maybe I will. But, right now I'm just talking about the abundance. I actually did the work, guys. I actually went to Wikipedia, and I got a fucking marker to write down all these titles because it's so absurd. Going back to fucking Ring of Honor and AEW, they have 2 6-man titles. 2? Are you fucking serious? You have Moxley and Claudio, whatever they're calling him, has been such a disappointment in Ring of Honor and AEW. He's just holding Moxley's jock, basically, and they're teaming him up with the young boy there, and they're the 6-man champion as the Death Riders. Now, I do appreciate that they got rid of that Deadpool, Bloodpool, whatever the fuck, Black Combat Club, whatever the fuck it was, Blackpool Combat Club. It made no sense, but they kept the name after Regal left for a year. At least they've done that. But they also have an AEW 6-man tag team champions, and it's called the Sons of Texas. I mean, are you guys aware of this? I wasn't until 20 minutes ago. I do like the contingency of the Von Erichs and Dusty Rhodes, and somehow, Sammy Guevara's in that group, and Sammy and Dustin have a nice little history. You might remember when Dustin, had a match for the, they called it like the fucking, what do they call that in AEW? The interim TNT championship match between Dustin and Sammy a couple of years ago. So I do like that group. I just don't like the name Sons of Texas. It's the most, as they say in the film industry, the most on-the-mark name for a wrestling group. The Sons of Texas? It's absurd. It's stupid. What else do you have? Okay, let's talk about these women titles. In AEW, it's not that bad. I mean, you still have, I think, when they first introduced the TNT women's title, I could have sworn that would have been a tag team title. Why don't they have a women's tag team title in AEW if they have 2 singles women's champions? And then you go over to fucking ROH. This is the list of all the ROH women's champions, or ROH champions in general. You have Athena as their women's world champion. Red Velvet is the ROH TV women's champion? Really? Do you really need that fucking title? At what point, everybody, are these titles just to satisfy the wrestler's ego? I mean, what's the point? I mean, does anyone say, I've got to tune into Honor Club on the fucking website tonight to watch Red Velvet defend her fucking ROH women's TV title? I wouldn't do such a thing. Would you? Maybe you do. I mean, when I was 13 years old, I would probably watch anything involved in professional wrestling. I would watch every single show. I couldn't get enough of it. I would sit through the bad wrestling. But maybe it's just a thing of getting older, having my own life, doing my own things. As many of you are discovering, life is too short for bad wrestling. And when these promoters and these bookers or creatives, wherever you want to call them, whether it's Triple H or Tony Khan or whoever the hell else, if they really can't come up with anything besides, let's just create more titles and have more title tournaments and just more fucking titles, more belts, that's not interesting to me. And I will go back in time now and tell you about, there was a period, maybe 1985, 1986, when Jim Crockett Promotions basically absorbed Georgia Championship Wrestling. That was in 84. And then a couple of years later, they absorbed Florida Championship Wrestling and also UWF. Those were in 87. And Central States Wrestling, I think, was in 86, where Mid-Atlantic, the former Mid-Atlantic Wrestling territories suddenly had the Florida title that Mike Rotundo had. He gave it to Rick Steiner. They had the former national title, which was the Georgia national title, and Ronnie Garvin had it, and then he lost to Black Bart. And you had like the UWF TV title that Terry Taylor lost at Starrcade 87. I have this little cocoa, by the way. Terry Taylor lost to Nikita Koloff at least in a unification match for the TV titles at Starrcade. My point is, that was a clusterfuck in itself. And I was a big fan of all those promotions, but at least those titles had some lineage and history onto themselves. In this NXT example, going back to NXT, you've got all these titles. I put them on the back. Oba, Femi, I mean, he's fine, but you have an NXT championship, which is basically the students title, the college title, the developmental league title. But then you have an NXT North American title. So you have a secondary champion, which is the NXT champion, Oba. And then you have an NXT North American champion, which is the Tony Mamaluke guy, whatever the fuck he is. Okay. And then you have Lexis King, Brian Pillman Jr. has this cup thing. And then you have an NXT tag team title, which is fine. But then you also have an NXT Women's Championship, and she's very good, I suppose, Julia, whatever the fuck. And you have an NXT North American Women's title. It's just painful. I mean, when I was writing these titles down, gentlemen, I was getting a headache. I really was, because how are any of these titles supposed to mean anything when there's so many of them? It just is so goddamn absurd to me. And it really just feels like, either the promoter, Triple H, or Tony Khan, whoever it is, they don't respect us as fans, or they don't respect the concept of a championship. A championship is supposed to be recognizing greatness that you fight for and you achieve. You know what I mean? Similarly, I mean, the Oscars, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, they used to just have 5 films for Best Picture nomination, and they raised that from 5 to 10. It wasn't because there was twice as many good films every year, or great films every year. It's because then twice as many films could advertise themselves as Oscar nominated for Best Picture, basically incentivizing more people to buy more tickets to see movies. And there you go. So they watered down the prestige of a Best Picture nomination just because they know that people are idiots and marks and they'll just buy more tickets. And I mean, that's how I feel that these 2 major United States wrestling promotions feel about you and I, Ian, and everybody else. And even the guy that I didn't want to see his filthy, horrible comments, so I blocked his comments. Hello, Angry Accelerator Trick Shot. Very interesting. But basically, I just don't want to be talked down to as a wrestling fan, as an educated wrestling fan that probably knows more about the history of pro wrestling than 9/10 of the goddamn wrestlers working today. And that's not a goddamn joke. I'm just saying, I can't sit there and watch this shit if their creative is so fucking lazy that here's a belt, here's a belt, here's a belt. Go fuck your belts. Your belts mean nothing. I mean, it's just absurd and it's ridiculous. And I know that this is all like imagination land, and this is all like, to me as a kid, reading the wrestling magazines, watching wrestling on TV, it was basically creating this world of which, I existed as the fan, and these wrestlers were kind of creating this fantasy world. I mean, I guess I never really got into Dungeons and Dragons. I played once in my whole goddamn life, but the one time that I did play, I said, okay, well, basically everybody kind of has to concede that we're going into imagination land. You know what I mean? Like if you sit around and you play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever fantasy games you play with people, you have to kind of come to a group consensus. On some level, we know that we're wasting our lives doing this thing. Like at some level, this is absurd and stupid and ridiculous, but we're having fun. But if you had someone come into the Dungeons and Dragons game and just say, I'm the monolith monster and nobody can kill me and I've got all these 50 strength points and 2,000 speed points and 5,000 million fucking mystical magical points or whatever the fuck they do in this shit, then everybody would kind of just say, okay, asshole, we're not playing with you anymore. And that's how I feel about these wrestling people. Like, I just feel like throwing these belts and all these factions and just stupid shit, you can only do it so much before the educated fan turns their back on you. And I've turned my back. I mean, I've turned the channel. And it's not that I wish WWE ill or AEW ill. I made a point to watch the first Raw on Netflix. It was fine. It was about 30 minutes too much of the goddamn Rock and to a lesser extent Triple H putting themselves over. I mean, they keep telling us, the Rock and Triple H specifically, how this is all about the future and the young wrestlers and all this horse shit, but yet they always have to be on camera with their 45-year-old selves or their 50-year-old selves. I don't quite get that. You know what I mean? I mean, they're booing Hogan out of the building, which is the fans' right to do. But why do we have to sit through Triple H putting himself over? Why do we have to sit through The Rock putting himself over? I think they had 4 or 5 matches on that first Raw on Netflix. I think it was just 4. Anyway, let me look at some of these other titles. I think one thing that's interesting, now this is a little bit contradictory to what I just said, but maybe not. Jericho has made himself the ROH World Champion. Okay. Commander, okay, is like the TV champion. Lee Moriarty, is that the ROH Pure Wrestling Champion? I mean, just some of these belts are so fucking convoluted. The Pure Wrestling Champion. If you're going to have a Pure Wrestling Champion, you should have a goddamn circle in the middle of the ring, and the 2 guys are like wrestling in singlets for points. I mean, if that's a Pure Wrestling Championship, then what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to have a goddamn tope suicida in a fucking Pure Wrestling match. You're going to have like a arm drag, or not even an arm drag, a fucking fireman's carry. Red Velvet could never get fucking over. I mean, the biggest thing that she ever did, she was in that match with Shaquille O'Neal and Dustin Rhodes, you know, years ago. She was substituting for Brandy. I was there for that match, but she just basically held Jade Cargill's purse for 2 years in AEW. Look at these NXT champions. Here it is. If you had, this is why it really aggravates me, gentlemen, because when I did have a job interview for WWE Creative years ago, I had a concept that was purely spelled out that would have taken all this shit off the table. All these unnecessary belts would not be necessary had the WWE implemented my storyline so many years ago. So I'm very sensitive and I'm very critical because there is an answer to this fucking riddle, which I presented to these assholes so many years ago, but they didn't hire me, so fuck them. So what else? Private Party, tag team champions, okay. I mean, I remember, was it the first ever Dynamite that they beat the Hardys, not the Hardys, the fucking Young Fucks in a tag team tournament match, which I thought was nice. And now 5 or 6 years later, they finally have a title run. Okay. I know that everyone's getting all hot and moist over the fucking rookie Tony Storm gimmick. That's fine. That's good. Mariah May, Mercedes. I mean, Wikipedia lists Mercedes TNT title as a secondary women's title. Once again, they have 2 women's titles on ROH. It doesn't look like they have anywhere in AEW or ROH a women's tag team championship. They could, but they have to have 2 men's 6-man titles. It's a fucking absurd. So, I mean, that's about it, guys. I mean, I've just rattled and ranted and raved and rebuked But the biggest ointment in the fucking fly of pro wrestling these days is the overabundance of titles. There's too many titles. It shows a lack of creativity, a lack of organization, a lack of respect to us as fans. Gerald Glass, I don't know what that means. And so on and so forth. So if you guys have any further comments, it seems some of you have left in disgust. Even me discussing this problem causes everyone problems. I just think it's absurd. And so that's why I haven't been watching as many of these wrestling shows, because it's just not enjoyable. It's just not. It's just too many goddamn titles for too many goddamn wrestlers. Mike Messier.